this one seems to be being able to work.
Great.
It's not quite there yet.
Oh no, okay. Just give me the go ahead and I'll...
Richard, it has come up saying that it's live now on YouTube.
And it is now. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Housing and Homelessness Scrutiny Panel. So we will start then with the first agenda item. Any apologies? I know that we've just mentioned.
Apologies from Anthony Church.
Okay, brilliant. So second point is declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything to declare? No? Cool, okay. The third one is the Housing and Homelessness Working Plan. I believe we've got Linda with us now as well.
Hi, sorry, I just joined, missed the last couple of minutes. Are we on the strategy?
We're just on the Housing and Homelessness Work Plan. Just started. So I don't know who's taking that forward.
Bear with me a second.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought I had the right button pressed. I hadn't.
Oh, sorry, this is your work plan, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you. Sorry, I'll go back to mute.
Yeah, so that's got the reports that are expected at the next one. I'm not aware of any changes to that. And if Neris is happy that they're going ahead, then they're going ahead.
Okay, great. Oh, Stephen.
I was just going to say, I know we've got the next meeting covered, Richard, but there are future meetings, and I don't know if there's any discussion around items to come to future meetings.
Indeed. So as before, I mean, it would be good to have some items on the work plan for next municipal year. I mean, membership of the panel may change, but if you could have a sort of, whether at this meeting or at next month's, I think next month's might be more useful. If you have a think before then and have some sort of brainstorming around what you want to see on the work plan for the Housing and Homelessness panel in the next municipal year, then officers can start looking towards preparing the stuff that will go on.
Okay. Great. I'll remind people by email as well to have a think for next meeting. Do we have to vote on the Housing and Homelessness Work Plan now, or just agree to it and move to the next item?
Yeah, it's just the panel just agrees to it.
Okay.
Unless you want to put it to the vote. We've not had it before, but you're welcome.
No. Okay, that's fine then. Right, so the fourth item is the notes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments on that? No. Good. Nice and smooth.
Just send my very belated apologies for not attending the last meeting.
Okay. Cool. So moving on then to the update of the development of a tenants forum.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a should be a report there that people can see. I mean this goes back to July 2021 when there was a cross-party motion which was primarily concerned with what's called DSS discrimination against private sector tenants. A number of actions were agreed, and one of those was to establish a permanent tenants forum, and the aim is that a forum is developed composed of community groups and stakeholders representing both council tenants and private rented sector tenants, and that forum be invited to consult directly with the panel and then biannually. At the time of the previous update report, which was March last year, Councillor Thomas, who was at the time the champion for private sector tenants, and she was in the process of setting up a tenants forum and had publicised that, and got a number of private rented sector tenants who were interested. However, she didn't think that there was enough there to actually go live and sustain such a forum. And that there was other organisations that operate in the city that also are in this space and needed to be engaged. Since then, there's been a change of portfolios, and also a reprioritisation of the focus of a lot of the work that we do in the private rented sector with the implementation of selective licensing. So, we found out in April last year that the government awarded it, and then we've obviously started selective licensing since September. So that sort of changed the balance of power in the sense that private rented sector tenants have now got far better protections in relation to eviction. They cannot be evicted from unlicensed properties, and the council itself is intervening a lot more in that particular sector. When this report was written back in November, the aim is to move this topic forward once we're fully up and running with the enforcement stage of the work, and we're going in a lot more properties, which is that's the stage pretty much where we're at now. And also you're looking at developing our relationship with the Oxford Students' Unions and others like that who we would like to hear from. So this is just an update for where we are, and clearly it's still a work in progress, and so happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Ian. Does anyone have any questions then on that? Linda?
Thank you. Yeah, it was just to say, obviously since we've had the news about the selective licensing, about us being able to implement that, the PRS team have been working flat out to deliver that, and I'd like to thank Ian for the excellent work he's done leading that team to get us into the position where we're in now, where it's going really well. Obviously the first stage of letting everybody know about that scheme and how it was going to work was aimed at landlords themselves. Obviously they're the ones that needed to come forward and apply for a license, but I do, and that work's happened and is on and will be ongoing. But I think now is the time for us to start also focusing on residents as well, on private rented sector tenants, to let them know about their rights with the licensing scheme and the benefits it gives them. So I think that's relevant. And then the other thing to bear in mind as well is, of course, that the council motion, it also mentioned the involvement of council tenants as well. And I just think it's worth bearing in mind that there's a lot of work going on at the moment, readying ourselves to respond to the white paper on social housing, which is going to put far more emphasis on engagement and providing information and allowing our council tenants to really judge how we're doing as a landlord, and get involved with how the service is run. So I think that's relevant as well, and will perhaps take on some of that work that this forum might have done. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Rosie, I did see that you had your hand up. Did you want to speak? No, not yet. Okay, that's fine. Did anyone else have anything to raise? No? Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Linda. Okay, the next item then is the damp and mould in council owned and managed accommodation. Do we know who's presenting on that?
Combination of Mark and Councillor Smith, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, I haven't done one of these before.
Shall I kick off? Or yeah, no, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. Generally speaking, it's going very well. We've made quite a lot of changes in the way that we're dealing with damp and mould. Traditionally, it's been very much about treating the symptoms, and I think we're now very much looking at the causes, particularly with condensation. We're making quite a lot of changes, adding mechanical ventilation to properties. We've made quite a lot of changes in the way that we are dealing internally. So we've got a specialist damp and mould team who are reviewing the reports and reviewing the way that we communicate with tenants. We're looking at the way that we record information about damp and mould. So we've now got ways of recording in QL, specifically a work type for damp and mould, so we can track it more accurately. Traditionally, they've been reported in a number of ways, including leaks and mould and damp and halophane treatments, and we're having to go back through the historical data, trying to interpret it by using keywords, because we haven't recorded it as a specific issue, which we are now doing. So we're getting a much clearer picture of what's happening in our properties. We are looking at improving training to staff as well, so that everybody is aware of the issues that are that could be arising, and know what to tell tenants. Sorry, Linda, did you want to jump in there?
Not jump in, but when you finish, that's fine.
Okay. We are also making sure that we communicate with tenants, so that we're sending out postcards to all our tenants, making sure that they don't feel that they're suffering alone, that there is a point in them contacting us and getting us to come in and treat the issues. There is quite a large financial impact, because we're now trying to deal with the underlying issues. So we're estimating that there'll be a requirement for an extra £250,000 next year. I think a large part of that will be fitting ventilation, but also dealing with any other issues, allowing rising damp. Any issues that are caused by penetration obviously will be dealt with as standard repairs. So we'll also be looking at damp and mould as part of our capital investment programs, specifically to do with carbon reduction and roofing and windows and doors. I think some of the problems have arisen because we've done capital investment but haven't assessed the risk of damp and mould. So if we are fitting new damp doors and windows, for example, we are making properties far more airtight, which introduces risks of condensation. And that's really where we are.
Great, thank you, Mark. Linda, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, just to say, I think it's really good that the panel has requested this report. It is such a serious issue. I hope the report you've got provides you with some reassurance with how it's being dealt with. I've been reassured from the conversations I've had with officers in the council and at ODS that we are giving it treating it with the seriousness that it deserves. It's a very proactive response. We've written to every single council tenant to say, have you got a problem? If you've got a problem, let us know. If we've been out to fix a problem before and it's not been dealt with, let us know. I think we've got really tight systems in place to monitor the work, monitor jobs, and make sure they're completed. But most importantly, I think there's been quite a big attitude to change. So I think the damp and mold, when it's rising damp or from a leak or something, it's always been, quite fairly straightforward to deal with. You can deal with the root of the problem, job done. More difficult has been, the issues when it's down to condensation and the way the property is being used, the way it's being ventilated, the way it's being heated. And, it's possibly been the case in the past, that decoration has taken place, tenants have been given some advice, but for whatever reason, the issue has come back. And I think now there is a clear commitment to monitor the situation, and not sign off the job until there has been an improvement, and to support the tenant, whether that's through increasing ventilation, better extraction, all the different things that can be done, not just giving them a leaflet and saying it's down to the way you're using the property. So I'm pleased with where we're at. Look forward to your questions or comments.
Great, thank you. And Lawrence, I see you have your hand up as well.
You're still
Sorry,
muted.
Lawrence. Yeah, your microphone doesn't seem to be on.
Sorry, the plug had dropped out. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Yes, I'd just like to agree with everything that Linda said. Just a few small questions. Probably directed at Mark, I think. Monitoring severe cases. You and I have talked about this. I just wondered where we'd got to with not the specific case, but in general, providing monitoring equipment to council tenants who've got a severe problem.
We have basic monitoring equipment available, which we are offering. There isn't really take up on it. But we're offering simple electronic monitors which give a display of the relative humidity in the property, of the temperature in the property, and also record information about those items, and can be monitored remotely as well, but we haven't had any take up so far.
Oh, right. Okay. Thanks. Next question I had was to do with, I understand that extractor fans fitted to council properties are normally just basic on-off fans. Has any consideration been given to installing humidity controlled ones?
Yes, so that is what we are installing and have been installing for the last few years. They are continuous mechanical extract, so they are constantly extracting a small amount of air, and then in humid conditions they will boost up and extract more.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I mean, the couple of cases I've seen, the one of the basic problems is down to probably bad design of quite old flats, plus a certain amount of overcrowding. Obviously, in Oxford, that's going to be quite a difficult problem to tackle. But I did wonder whether we're doing enough to educate tenants on how to minimise the problems.
I think we have reviewed the council website. So I think that is a lot clearer about maintaining that balance of heat and ventilation. We are also looking at, we'll be sending out letters shortly to some tenants who are not using fans, even though they've been provided, explaining the benefits and the importance of ventilation. But yes, I think I am also meeting with tenancy involvement on Wednesday to look at how we might do more with that.
Okay, thank you. And finally, a quick one for Linda. We've just talked about the selective licensing scheme. Is this a problem, or is this something we should be thinking about in connection with licensing of private rented properties?
I'll let Ian come in with some more detail, but I can just say that, because of the licensing scheme, we're in a really good position on this. We've got more resource to actually go in and inspect properties and, deal with safety hazards than, if we didn't have that in place. So we're in a really good position. We have made representations to government as well about increasing the severity of Ian can help me out with the technical detail, but increasing the severity, the seriousness of damp and mold as hazards with the safety rating that our enforcement officers give it. So at the moment, I think, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a category 2 hazard, isn't it? Damp or mold. And we've asked for it to be bumped up to a category 1 hazard. So increasing the seriousness, increasing the potential penalties for landlords, and increasing our ability to act. And we've also asked for, you might know that Michael Gove announced his intention to bring in an Awab's law after the tragic death of Awab Ishak in Rochdale. But as the detail that we know about that so far suggests it's only going to be applied to social landlords in terms of setting out standards for the response, response time and standards of response to mold and damp. And we've made representations to government saying that should cover the private rented sector as well. But Ian can give you a bit more technical detail about how damp and mold is dealt with within the licensing scheme at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the licensing scheme is giving us the that ability to target all of the private rented sector properties. We will know where they are because they're supposed to have a license, so we're able to target visits at the stock that we know generates issues with damp and mold, and we're able to get that information out to landlords. Just building on what Linda said. When we go and assess damp and mold hazards, quite often they come out as category 2, not category 1. In the main, that's the issue. And you can see that from Michael Gove's direction to local authorities, he said that high scoring category 2 damp and mold hazards, the council should be looking at taking enforcement action in those cases. And that's an indication that the system itself is wrong, because it should be coming out of category 1 hazards for damp and mold. So that's where Councillor Smith has said, we've campaigned and pushed the government to improve that. And in relation to this work area, we've also had to submit a long return back to the government, outlining how many complaints we get, how many notices be served, etc., etc. So we've had to push all that information back to government in a similar way to our housing services colleagues as well, which we've done. But I mean, I think for us, as Linda said, we're in a better place than many. We've had an active role in the HMO market, since 2011. And now with selective licensing, we're able to expand that into the whole of the private rented sector. And damp and mold is clearly one of those issues that, in the same way that we've just heard that there's that attitude shift around it. It's the same thing in the private rented sector. We are looking for repairs to be carried out, and extra maintenance, etc., etc., and we'll be able to do that as part of that selective licensing scheme.
Great. I did have it as chair. So, Lawrence, did you want to follow up on anything?
No. I just wanted to say thank you to Ian and Linda for that very good news about the private side of the housing market.
Great. Yeah, and then just to jump on it, I was just wondering if So I know we've got resources on Oxford City Council on how to deal with damp and mold, but similarly, like is there scope for the privately rented properties for tenants to be able to escalate, to be signposted on how to escalate damp and mold if the landlord isn't being responsive in the interim while we're waiting for this to be picked up as part of the selective licensing, or is it something that we wouldn't be able to do?
We are doing that. You know, we've got the specific web pages that we've got, and we're encouraging tenants to report matters through to us, and we can obviously use that as a trigger for our inspection program as well. Wherever, you know, private rented sector tenants report stuff through to us, we're using that as a trigger to go and carry out visits.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Nerys?
Yes, I was just going to add one further thing to sort of what Mark and Linda have said from the sort of social landlord kind of side of things, is that in addition to the sort of specialist team that Mark has put together internally, I've also sort of set up a task force really to ensure that that kind of proactive strategic approach is kind of going to be managed sort of from, well, you know, from when we submitted an action plan to the regulator on the 19th of December through until, you know, we're satisfied really that the kind of it's become a more business as usual. So it's just to kind of give reassurance. We've touched on some of it, but just to give reassurance that, you know, every aspect from operational to strategic is now kind of under the auspices of that task force to push the work forward and ensure we've got eyes on it really all the way around.
Great, thank you. And Ian?
Yeah, I thought it was just worth coming back because then there's another group of people, the housing association tenants, and we're the enforcing authority for housing associations. So if the tenants in that particular sector are not, you know, getting any joy through their social landlord, then they can complain to us as well, and we will pick that up. And we do take formal action against housing associations. You know, we've served a civil penalty against A2 Dominion before now. So, you know, where necessary, we will take that action because we expect those housing associations to act in the same responsible manner as ourselves. So that's what we expect.
Great, thank you. Joe, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I couldn't see where to do the raise hand on the iPad. Yeah, I just wondered, thank you very much for all that feedback and the report, Linda and Ian. I just wondered whether there were any flats that had internal bathrooms where it was difficult to put in monitors and extractor fans, where there might be more damp gathering in the accommodation.
We haven't come across that yet. There obviously are bathrooms that are internal, that aren't on external walls. But generally we are able to run ducting in boxing to the outside walls or through the roof. So that hasn't been an issue as yet. But there are quite a few challenges running ducts and fitting extractor fans. We've got flats where all the walls are windows basically, so that can be difficult. But yeah, we are overcoming those challenges.
And then can you box in the ducts along adjoining rooms and create a fitting in the external window?
Yes. So our example where we've got flats with all the wall covered in windows, very often there'll be things like boiler cupboards where we can fit extractor vans into the external wall and then duct it to the boiler cupboard wall. And we can follow soil and vent pipes out through the property. So yeah, we're managing to overcome those issues.
There's a way of doing it. That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Does anyone else have Anything on this agenda item? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Mark and Linda, for that. So the next item is the housing performance report for the second quarter. Do we have a presenter for that one?
Yeah, I'm here to, thanks. So we've produced a report detailing performance across all housing services and the HRA functions. We actually submitted, I think, Q2 and Q3 part of the pack. I'm going to talk through Q3 for the moment, as it's kind of the most up-to-date data and information that we have available. So I'll go through kind of all the KPIs, corporate and service, briefly. So the rough sweeping, we are meeting our target there. We're actually below kind of the target for the number of rough sleepers without an offer of accommodation. So our target is 30. We're actually at 26 as of the end of December, which is really good work going on within that area. Give you kind of a brief update on, of those 26, 11 individuals have no recourse to public funds, and the remaining 15 are kind of mostly waiting for supported accommodation. And we're hoping that kind of a continued expansion of the Housing First programme will offer some options to some of our most entrenched rough sleepers within that area. So positive work going on, but as we said, we have limited options for the individuals with no recourse to public funds, although there is support available for them with regards to kind of immigration status, and there's an offer by the Oxfordshire Homeless Movement for them. Households in temporary accommodation, we're continuing to see kind of a high increasing pressure on statutory homeless services, with actually a really high number of prevention and relief duties being accepted recently. To give you an example of that, in January and February, we accepted 102 prevention and relief duties, and that's compared to 110 in the whole of Q3. So you can see that kind of the approaches to our service are increasing, which has led to an increased pressure on temporary accommodation. You'll see that we're slightly over target for the number kind of within there. And we think that's kind of linked to the increase of living costs, obviously, that people are experiencing, some complexity within placements. So I think despite kind of considerable pressure on the service, we're still continuing to perform and make kind of significant progress to our transformation programme in temporary accommodation to help move individuals on and meet some of the challenges of the complex clients. You also see that the households in temporary accommodation over 12 months, we set quite ambitious targets this year to reduce the length of stay of households in temporary accommodation. And there has been some really good work across the teams that's seen that number reduce from 40 in July to 20 at the end of December. And again, that's kind of linked to the transformation programme and us focusing more on rapid rehousing to ensure people move on to a good quality, secure home, kind of with the right supports. So although we've not quite met the target, we're kind of continuing to work hard to bring this number down, and we'll see that kind of hopefully to decrease over the coming months and year. We also have a project called Settled Oxfordshire, which we hope will be able to offer some accommodation to singles, which obviously we're struggling to accommodate due to the lack of affordable one-bedroom properties. So I hope that will help bring that number down. We've been there over 12 months. Prevention duties, continuing to meet this target of accommodation over 60%. At the end of the prevention duty, so that's really good there, especially when you consider kind of the increased living costs that we're having. With regards to affordable development, we're on track to meet its targets. A couple of new developments over the last couple of months. We've had 18 new homes delivered by our partners Peabody at Newman Place, and Ox Place has delivered 8 nearly carbon bungalows for individuals with mobility needs. That can be allocated to people off the General Housing Register. Some examples there of work ongoing. Our relet time for our council-owned housing stock, so we're continuing to see challenges within that area. As of the end of Q3, our standard relet time is at 100 days, which is over our target, which is 21 days at the moment. Quite a few kind of factors that have led to that being over, and you see over the last couple of quarters that's slowly increased. mainly due to capacity within ODS, linked to following a lot of new builds and acquisition programs, which has caused increased workload on ODS, which they've kind of struggled to manage. But they have recently increased the capacity within their voids team of 8 new members of staff. So hopefully moving forward, that should reduce some of the relet time. Linked to some of the new builds coming on board is within our own allocations team. The time it takes to us to shortlist and offer properties has increased just due to the number of new builds coming through. But again, due to the kind of the restructure and transformation in housing needs, allocations team are all now fully staffed. So we're starting to see that backlog of shortlisting it's starting to come down. So hopefully the offers will be made a lot quicker moving forward. There's also kind of factors linked to increased health and safety measures relating to asbestos and Legionella sampling moving forward, which is some kind of issues in that area. And we also, over kind of previous months, have made a decision to focus some of our void turnovers on temporary accommodation units to ensure that we can move households on out of bed and breakfast accommodation. But obviously that's had an impact on our general accommodation stock in that area. Energy efficiency, we're ahead of our targets to have 38% of our housing stock with an EPC rating of C or below. So that's really positive work there. Within the report, we've also included information from ODS regarding the repairs completion time, and colleagues from our rents team have provided information on the rent collection, and both are in target and being met. So happy to answer any kind of further questions on these or over any other targets.
Thanks, Amy. So does anyone have any questions on that? Lawrence? And then Rosie.
One quick question. Where do the asylum seekers housed at the Kassam fit into these figures, or don't they?
They don't fit into the figures that the Richard wants to give her.
No, they're not linked. They're not housed by the council, so that they don't appear on the temporary accommodation figures. This is just people who are housed in temporary accommodation units or hotels by the council who are statutory homeless. That's where those figures come from.
Okay.
Lawrence, what we may begin to see coming through here is some of those people who come through the Homes for Ukraine scheme. I mean, we're not seeing large numbers coming through at the moment, but we're anticipating that moving forward, we'll start seeing increasing numbers of people who are engaged in Homes for Ukraine because their placements have fallen down. But again, officers are kind of working very closely with those hosts and guests to kind of mitigate against that.
Great, thank you. And Rosie?
Thanks. I just had a question on the targets around moving council housing stock to retrofitting to a better EPC rating. I just wondered how we currently prioritize that work, and whether one of the things that we can do is kind of target and prioritize households which are most in need of warmer homes and cheaper bills and that kind of thing. Thanks.
Nerys would.
Yeah. Shall I try with that, Rosie? So far, the work that we've done, we commissioned a report last year from Bailey Garner, who kind of looked at our stock collectively, from not just up to EPCC, but how we would get to net zero. And that report was then used as a sort of foundation for the building of the bid that we've put into the Social Housing Decarb Fund. And in order to really kind of maximise kind of the finances and the kind of efficiency, the programmes that are built really on kind of either archetypes or sort of geographical kind of basis rather than individual sort of properties that are scattered around, because that from our experience of running previous programmes, that is very difficult to do. We don't get the kind of I guess get the most out of those programs if they are run like that. However, when we come to look at, we're still awaiting the outcome of the social housing decarb fund that's referenced in the report. There, we're kind of now really hoping to hear kind of any time soon. So once we've got that, and then we're able to kind of resettle down the program, we will make some consideration of the points you raised. But I'll be honest and say that when we're running those kind of programs efficiently, then it's not the way they are programmed at the moment.
Great, thank you. Stephen, yeah.
Can I tell? I mean, one of the things that we, Norris and I, have been working on is a kind of a more clear investment program into the social housing stock. So, and we are looking about how we use our HRA. We recently commissioned a bit of a review of the HRA, and I think one of the key elements of that will be investment in the stock, and the decarb program will form, or interventions that will support decarb will form part of that work moving forward. But that's a longer term investment approach that we're working on.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that agenda item? No. Okay, so then that leaves us with our final agenda item, which is the housing, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. Do we have a presenter for that one?
Yeah. Happy to introduce or
yeah, that'd be great.
I'm happy to do it. Do you want an officer or me? Or
I'm happy if you wanted to
Amy, why don't you go through it? Is this the first time it's been to the panel? It didn't come to the panel. Okay, yeah. So it's really just about what's happened. Yeah. So okay.
Yes. So the housing, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy came to panel in October. I believe it was the October panel, where we kind of run through the evidence base and our emerging priorities within the strategy there, and kind of run through them, the top 5 priorities. So yeah, it's just to bring it back today to explain what's happened from the consultation. So for those of you who remember, we're required by law to have a homelessness and rough sleeping strategy reviewed every 5 years, and that's to be based on kind of a review in an evidence base. We completed quite a comprehensive review 2021 now, I believe, 22, I can't remember, 21, so I'm forgetting what confuse my years. And that kind of based our emerging priorities, which are in the draft strategy. And we made the decision to combine our housing, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy due to the interdependencies there. And we took the draft strategy to Cabinet back in October and received approval to go out to public consultation, 6-week public consultation in November. There's some really positive feedback from that, and the overall consensus was that people agreed with our priorities and our kind of, how we're going to meet those priorities that are emerging from that. Yeah, we've then kind of developed an action plan moving forward. So we worked closely with colleagues across the council to set out more detail around how we would meet each action over the next 12 months. And that will be monitored throughout the year and kind of provide our evidence base to how we're progressing against the strategy. The strategy is due to go to Cabinet on the 15th of March, and then to full council on the 20th of March, subject to kind of approval. The strategy will then be implemented in April. And a full review of the action plan and progress made against the strategy will be completed on an annual basis, and obviously brought back to panel and Cabinet to be monitored that way. I think Linda's got a hand up.
Yeah, Linda.
Can I just add, I'd just like it noted that what a fantastic job Amy and her colleagues did with the consultation. A really tremendous response, over 100 responses, 60 people at a workshop representing nearly 30 organisations. I mean, we don't get that level of engagement on something like the council budget. So, it's really proud of the job you did on that, and the fact that after all that engagement from all those really high caliber stakeholders, not much has changed, suggests that you did a really good job on the original document as well. So thank you very much for your work on that.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's echoed by everyone on the panel as well. Stephen, did you?
Thanks. I mean, I was just looking at some of the actions that the panel wanted us to resolve from the last meeting. So you'll see that there's a very robust glossary of terms, which kind of, I'm sure, gives you lots more understanding around the words that are coming up in the document. So I think, Amy, just to kind of give assurance to the panel that we've picked up all of those actions, haven't we, in the revised strategy? I can see Richard, Neris and Amy nodding. So just wanted to give the panel that assurance that we've done that.
Yeah, I think there's some other actions, definitely one relating to the figures with the affordable developments, which we've gone back and we've outlined in a kind of a clear table. And yeah, again with colleagues within planning and affordable development teams, we've made sure they're really kind of clear and the correct figures in the strategy there.
Great. Any questions for Amy? Rosie?
I don't know if these are questions or whether like you want to move through like different sections or comments on different sections of the report or recommendations, but I had some thoughts that have come through since the last meeting, because I think originally some of the questions that I asked, for example, and others were around like trying to get a sense of the numbers and figures of how many houses and that kind of thing and what proportion were affordable. And I feel like I have some like thoughts on those since, but I don't know if this is the right time to start raising that, or you just want some, or it's just general questions.
I think that's fine. Yeah, you can raise them.
Fabulous, thank you. So yeah, no, I also echo everything that Linda was saying about how much work has clearly gone into this, and especially filtering through more than 100 responses to the consultation. So really appreciate that. And I can see as well, even things that I and others have put in, I can see that they've come through. So it really shows that that's they've been listened to. So I really appreciate that. One of the things that I kind of wanted to raise was like around the priority 1 section, around like building of affordable homes, and sort of putting a challenge to the percentages that we've put towards like social rent, allocations towards social rent over other forms of housing. And I recognise that we've got the current target as the majority of affordable homes will be for social rent, I think just over 50%. But as I understand it, like there are limits on how much we can make available even in government regulation, but still we can go higher than 50%. And I feel like given the evidence base that has been kind of drafted, it's quite clear that with, you know, one of the largest waiting lists for social housing, that this is an area that we should prioritise completely. And rather than, for example, with shared ownership, another type, which is more about trying to get people on the housing ladder, as I understand it, give them a leg up. And I was going to kind of like make the suggestion that we, like as the scrutiny panel, like challenge the figure of majority being 50%. I'd be interested to hear like thought that like from officers and Linda, like why specifically that number was attributed. But I would kind of also like to kind of push that I've seen other councils do better, like Cambridge, for example, has 70-75%. And I kind of am wondering what they're doing that's different. I don't know if anyone can help me. Obviously, you might not know specifically about what Cambridge is doing, but it feels to me that we could be more ambitious than this. And I kind of wanted to propose that as a first step, basically. Thanks.
Thanks, Rosie. Stephen?
Yeah, I'll try and come back on some of that. I mean, I think the whole issue around affordable housing is a massive issue, and actually, you know, the strategy sets out our approach, but actually while you were talking, Roger, I was thinking, is that something that we need to come back to? Is that a forward plan item for this panel where we can talk about affordable housing? Because there's linkages to planning policy as well. So it's not just simply around housing and our strategic housing function. It has to do with planning. So I don't know, but I'm thinking that that's probably a more specific item that the panel might want to look at in the forward plan, and we could get ourselves, housing colleagues and planning colleagues, and also importantly, OX Place, who are our deliverer in this space, kind of just to talk through some of those differences. I mean, you know, the whole, if we use social rent or affordable rent, you know, that's all to do with the viability of schemes. So I think it's a very complicated area. Really great question, but I think that might be something we want to dedicate a panel session to, and we can get the right officers here. So, you know, Dave Scholes from our side and other officers who could come and talk about affordable housing in the round. I don't know how you feel about that, and probably Councillor Hollingsworth as well, because he's obviously the portfolio holder leading on that. I don't know what others think of that suggestion, Linda.
Yeah, that sounds like a good suggestion. But I was just going to say, you know, I think we just need to be really careful with this, and that, you know, by doing something with the best of intentions, it doesn't have perverse consequences. You know, as Stephen said, it's all about the viability of individual schemes. And if, you know, if our position is, you know, we want 75% affordable housing, and we're not going to do any developments that, sorry, 75% social rent, and we're not going to do any developments that haven't got 75% social rent, that could mean that, you know, some schemes just aren't viable for us to bring forward, and so they don't happen, or, you know, we end up selling that piece of land to someone else that can bring it forward. So it's always a balance. I mean, our priority is always going to be affordable housing, and within that, our priority is always going to be social rent. So it's always going to be about a balance, and I don't want us to be tying our hands to a policy that actually means we're able to progress fewer projects and have less housing, because it means that schemes aren't viable if we're sort of bound by it.
I mean, just to also add to that, just to speak up, I think, for the city, because actually, you know, OX Place, you know, and they are delivering really well. They're delivering lots of affordable housing, and, you know, other authorities are not as advanced in relation to the affordable housing delivery as we are, from being pretty candid. So I think, yes, we can learn from others, and I think we can take that back. But we are, I think, you know, worked in a couple of authorities now, and I think we are definitely far advanced than other local authorities in our delivery of affordable housing. That doesn't mean we shouldn't push ourselves a little bit more, but you know, we're doing a good job.
Great. Rosie, is that a hand up to come back on that? Or?
Maybe just brief, if that's okay. I really appreciate that, and I recognise, of course, that like the financial viability is like a really important balance to get right. And I suppose I don't know, like being new to a scrutiny panel, I'm not sure what is useful for us to deliver. But in my mind, I was thinking that if the rest of the panel like believed that this was like something to kind of look at or push for, it might be helpful to recommend that like we see space for improvement. I think I see, like, it feels like there's space for improvement, having seen what is being delivered elsewhere, and given the fact that we have such extraordinary like rates of homelessness and housing, like in Oxford, it feels like we need to step up to go beyond. And I'm a bit concerned, for example, the way in which like the kind of second thing I was going to mention was the kind of push for shared ownership models, and how that's like quite a different group of people to be prioritizing. But yeah, I suppose what I was hoping for is a recommendation that I appreciate the offer of like a meeting coming up soon, but I feel like this strategy has very specific targets in it, and what I was kind of proposing was that we should recommend moving forwards that those are reviewed and increased, or that percentage of just being the majority. That was sort of my proposal, but I suppose it's up to the panel.
Yeah. Oh, Stephen, do you want to come in?
I was just thinking, I mean, and Neris and Richard and others, Amy can tell me, were we planning to review the plan on a kind of annual basis and bring it back? So actions within the plan, were we going to review it and bring it back?
Yeah, so the strategy is a 5-year strategy, but with annual action plan revisions. So you know, if wider changes to the local plan, for example, happened, we could then capture those in the action plan in subsequent years.
So there's an opportunity then for us to have a discussion, and if there are any changes that can come from that discussion, we can feed it into the annual review. But I think, you know, as Linda says on this, we need to tread very carefully because it's a very fine balance. But we still, as officers, should put the positions and the options to you as a panel, and you're able to make those recommendations. So I think we've got it will be updated annually. So there's an opportunity for us to do it, Rosie.
Thanks. I think before Richard, you come in, I just wanted to make a comment on Rosie's point actually about how, yeah, the 50. We already know that Oxford is you know, half private rented and half council homes, and I'm just wondering how that kind of 50% full mark again is still perpetuating that like divide between it being that close in split between private rented sectors, which we don't have as much control over as opposed to council homes. So yeah, it's kind of something that I am mindful of as well, and hope that we can try. Yeah, I appreciate that, you know, there is financial aspects and you know, other things that we need to consider, but at the same time, like a bit like where we can, if we can improve that percentage, it would be really, really useful longer term. Yeah. Richard?
I mean, it is of course for the panel to decide, and I can't think. I mean, Jill sadly doesn't have a vote, but other councillors do. But a recommendation arising from Councillor Rawls' suggestion, which I think Councillor Smith might be able to agree with, or might be able to come back with a sort of constructive response of engagement with it, something like that the council considers how it can move towards a higher percentage of social rent as a proportion of housing, not time limiting it, but giving it as an aspiration. And my little offering to throw into the mix, and it is for you to decide.
Thank you. Lawrence?
I wanted to ask a question about Airbnb type accommodation that's mentioned in the report. I'm a little unclear as to what powers the council may or may not have to regulate short-term lets. And I'm slightly confused about, I noticed there was a comment that 104 houses had stopped paying council tax. Do they then transfer to business rates?
Yeah, if you want me to come in here. I mean, just to answer that point about the 104. What happened there was that the owners of those properties registered them as businesses, so they stopped paying council tax. And so what we've done with those businesses is that we do treat them as businesses, and we no longer collect the waste from their properties. So they've had to secure commercial waste contracts with ODS largely, but they can obviously go and get someone else to do that for them. So they are treated as businesses there. In terms of our powers, I mean, this is a topic that we have been pushing for quite some time, for additional powers. At the moment, we are restricted to planning enforcement powers, and we've been actively enforcing the change of use part of the planning legislation with those properties that have gone over to short lets. You know, we have to do each property on a case-by-case basis, but our planning enforcement service has been dealing with this as a priority and continues to do so when complaints come in about properties, and we're able to evidence that it is no longer what's called a C3 residential property and has actually turned into you know, a short-term holiday let accommodation type, which needs planning permission to be able to do that. So, you know, what we would like as an authority is to have, you know, more powers around this, you know, to control that, you know, which is you know, what's happening in Scotland, where, you know, they've got much better powers than us. So that's what we'd like. But you know, we have to operate within our current legal system, which is quite constraining and quite resource intensive.
Do I assume that selective licensing doesn't apply to short lets?
No, because it's not the person's main home. So, you know, licensing like HMO licensing, it only applies where it's the person's main residence, and clearly, you know, short let it's not, is it? And so it doesn't get captured by that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Rosie?
Thanks. I was just going to, following on from Richard's comment, I think that sounds like a really good way forward. And essentially I wasn't hoping to be prescriptive, but definitely like keen to recommend that we try to increase that proportion over time, and perhaps that can be, I'd like to propose that as a recommendation from the panel if the rest of the panel thinks that's a good step forward, and adding in perhaps, Stephen, what you were saying about us having a meeting with those like wider stakeholders where we can make sure that we're not just kind of arbitrarily picking numbers, etc. And the kind of how that folds into the annual plan sounds like action plan sounds like a good way forward too.
Great, thank you. So should we put that to a vote then as a panel? Joe and Lawrence, does that sound reasonable to you?
It does to me.
Sorry, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Yeah, that's unanimous then, I think, because yeah, I feel the same. Like, I think that would be a really good way forward. So could we have that added to the minutes? Possible.
You will have more than simply added to the minutes. A report will be written and sent to cabinet as well.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Any other comments on the strategy?
Sorry, I have one more if that's okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
But really appreciate that one. So thank you. And sorry for being so garbled on a long day. My second question was around the priority 3 section around net zero homes, and I was like, I appreciated that what had kind of been brought into that was the recognition that like Oxford has a zero carbon roadmap, and that we're trying to make sure that this fits into those kind of wider plans and citizens' assemblies work. But as I understand it, the zero carbon roadmap says that by 2025, we plan to have 100% homes that will be EPC grade A, have an EPC at grade A. But then the current strategy says that we aim to build 40% below the national standard. And I guess my concern around the national standard in particular is that can change, whereas, for example, like a standard like Passive House or an absolute standard is much more secure. So I just kind of wondered how those things match up, and also whether the 40% below national standard really does help us meet those targets, because as I understand it, as I've read in our own plan and elsewhere, that really we ought to be aiming for Passive House as a standard, especially as it will cost more to retrofit in the future, for example, to bring those up to standard.
So I don't know if any of my colleagues know the answer to that question, because I don't, because we're very dependent on this part with OX Place colleagues and the council's energy team, who are the experts in this area. I understand, we worked extensively with them, and I understand what's in the strategies aligned to everything, all the existing commitments the council's made. But if it would be helpful, we can take away an action to get any clarity for the panel.
That'd be great. I hope I'm reading the right place as well, and I might not be, but I just found something along the lines of it being like EPC grade by 2025. So that was just the thing I wanted to query, basically.
Okay, Rosie, if you want to follow up in an email to me exactly, in more
great.
detail, I can pass that on to colleagues
awesome.
and come back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. Cheers, Richard.
Great, thank you. Any further comments on the strategy? No? Okay, let's have a look. I think that's the final item, unless there's any other business that anyone wants to raise.
So a reminder for, and also to those out there watching it on the internet, to email suggestions to go onto the work plan and to think about them in advance of the next meeting. Sounds like there's one item coming up on the work plan is social rent, social housing, affordable housing. And also I will write up a report giving the panel's recommendation to Cabinet for Wednesday's meeting. Looking at Amy and Councillor Smith, I shall aim to get it out tomorrow by lunchtime, which I hope will give you time to write a paragraph or so in response, or sentence, depending on how long the response is going to be. Or it may be, Councillor Smith, that you prefer to respond orally on Wednesday rather than submitting the written response. I realise time is against us.
I think it'd be better to have a written response. If we can do that in time, I'm sure we can.
Excellent. I shall try and get that out first thing tomorrow. Well, first thing after writing it. And then I'll send that to you, Councillor Dunn, as well, for approval before it gets published.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Okay, well.
And so the date of the next meeting I seem to have left off. And I now can't remember when the date of your next meeting is. The 24th of April.
24th of April.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
24th of April.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you, everyone. And see you again on the 24th of April then.
Thanks very much.
So much all. Cheers.
Right, enjoy the rest of your
Thank you very much.
Thanks.